do that, George. How are you? Chris, how are you?
I'm Chris Matthews. Let's play hardball. Well, it's nice to have you back on the college tour. This is the second time we've had Senator John McCain. The last time was at Clemson in South Carolina, a state you remember very fondly. Let me ask you, Senator McCain, do you think, all things considered, your rival George W. Bush would have been better off if he let us handle his college visits?
I think so. And by the way, could I mention what you already know, and that is my wife Cindy attended this wonderful institution, the University of Southern California. And she graduated in 1936. Excuse me, 1976, if I remember right. And my mother attended the University of Southern California, and my old roommate at the Naval Academy, Jack Dittrich, now is here at the business school, and I'm Rich Fellow.
Senator McCain, if we decided to continue our magical mystery tour, our college tour, to another institution in South Carolina, to Bob Jones, if they would have us, would you come?
You know, we'd have probably the best time we've ever had, because we would tell them that it's time to jump into the 17th century. I mean, really, I think we'd have a great time.
You've raised the issue of the hour, Senator. Yesterday, you said that Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell, two prominent figures on the religious right, were part of the forces of evil. This afternoon, your campaign manager said that you were caught up in the moment. You're caught up in the moment.
Chris, I was on the bus with the media and I was talking about Luke Skywalker getting out of the Death Star, our usual routine. Look, I'm not saying that they're forces of evil. I say they're wrong. I say they're bad for the Republican Party, and they are taking us in the wrong direction. That's what I've been saying. I stand by that speech. I stand by that comment.
Is that the kind of thing?
But I'm not saying that they are evil people, okay? I'm saying that they are wrong, and where our party is going, he is going to doom us to permanent minority status unless we become a party of reform, a party of inclusion, a party of Ronald Reagan, and not Bob Jones.
Well, let me allow you the opportunity to correct then in full. This is a portion of your statement yesterday. To stand up and take on the forces of evil, that's my job, and I can't steer the Republican Party. If those two individuals, that's Falwell and Robertson, have the influence that they have in the party today, you're supposed to tolerate evil in the name of party unity. That's not what the party is all about. Are those individuals a bad influence on the party?
I was talking just before that about Luke Skywalker getting out of the Death Star and all the things associated with that. But yes, we do not want them leading our party. I made that very, very clear in a speech down at Virginia Beach, and I mean that. And if
how do you distinguish between the good guys and the bad guys on the religious right? What are the good guys? Who are they?
Oh, I think Chuck Colson is certainly a very fine person. Billy Graham is one of the finest men that ever walked the face of this earth. Reverend Schuler is a wonderful man. Look, the overwhelming majority, in my view, of the, quote, religious right in this country are wonderful, marvelous people who share values and ideals and goals and provide guidance for people like me. That's wonderful. I'm saying these two individuals, when an individual makes phone messages, as Pat Robertson did, that alleges that Senator Warren Rudman, a good and decent man, is a vicious bigot, then that's wrong. And there's no place in the Republican Party for that kind of activity. That's what I'm talking about.
You made an even stronger statement in your speech on Monday, which your campaign manager said you will stand by, that whole speech, where you said that there's a comparison here between the two people on the left you mentioned in that speech, Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, and of course Al Sharpton, who's a New York figure of some note. and you compared those two gentlemen on the left with the two gentlemen before, Robertson and Falwell on the right, would you put them on a plane of moral equality? Those four people? Are they the same type morally?
One is on the left fringe, and the other is obviously on the other extreme. I can't compare their backgrounds.
But you did. You put them together in one bag and shook it up.
They both are on the extreme ends of the political process, and neither one of them are good. Neither end are good for the political process. In the case of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, they're bad for my party. I think if my view were asked by the Democrats, that Sharpton and Farrakhan are bad for the Democrat Party as well.
On the Democratic side, you know, if you're a Republican, you say Democrat is an adjective. If you're a Democrat, at least were one, you say Democratic. Do you think that Al Sharpton well, let's talk about Al Sharpton. He's been having these sort of political visits up in New York. It's almost like visiting the local pontiff or something. You go up there and you have to pay court to Al Sharpton. Do you think that those guys who went up there, in the same way you've said that your opponent, George W. Bush, should have raised the issue of the anti-Catholicism, which is part of apparently the creed of Bob Jones University. Should they have raised the issue of the lies that Al Sharpton told about Tawana Brawley?
Sure they should have. Sure they should have. And also that not only is Bob Jones anti-Catholic, but anti-Mormon, anti-African-American, and other organizations as well. But yeah, of course they should have brought it up, in my view.
You said that George W. Bush is a Robertson Republican. You've got the support of Gary Bauer. Are you a Bauer Republican?
I'd be proud to have, and am proud to have Gary Bauer on our team. He has been, he worked in the Reagan administration as Deputy Secretary of Education. He conducted himself marvelously through the campaign debates, and I think a great deal of him.
You know, you see him as part of the sort of the political big tent mainstream. I mean, you see that as a legitimate part. You know, back when Colin Powell was being talked up for president, back in '95, Gary Bauer dismissed his possible candidacy as Clinton with ribbons.
And we have other disagreements. In fact, we had a disagreement about my comments today, and we will have other disagreements. But overall, Gary Bauer is a fine and decent man in my view. And again, I'm honored to have his support.
Do you feel your statement about your campaign manager today was a retraction that was demanded by Gary Bauer? Is that a sufficient retraction for him in terms of the use of the term forces of evil?
I don't know, but the fact is that I must not and will not retract anything that I said in that speech at Virginia Beach. It was carefully crafted, it was carefully thought out, and it really is about the direction of the Republican Party. We've lost the last two presidential elections, we've lost the last two congressional elections. We have become, at least here in California, in the view of many, as an exclusionary party. Ask any Hispanic citizen in this state, and we want to be a big party. We want to reach out to these young people. We want them with us. We want them to be part of this great experiment. That's what this campaign is all about. And unless I repudiate those people, then really we don't have a message.
Well, maybe this is a trick question. I don't think so. But
Senator, never would Chris Matthews ask a trick question. What do you think?
If you had gotten a better vote from this crowd, would you be lacing into them now? You got a lousy vote from them down in South Carolina. You got a terrible vote in Virginia yesterday. Is that why you're going after them? Because they're already decided against you?
I made this speech before the vote in Virginia, as you know.
But you've got great tracking polls. I know you do.
Well, no. Chris, this really is which direction is the Republican Party going into? Are we the party of addition or division? Are we the party of inclusion or exclusion? Really, look, this campaign now has become bigger than John McCain. With my ego, that's very hard to say. But the fact is, this has become all about the direction and the reform of the party and politics in America. We have made reform a centerpiece of this campaign and will now be the centerpiece of American politics. And it'll mean giving them back their government. That's what this campaign is all about.
Bill Bennett also, as you know, you keep up with this every day, all day long. I know Bill Bennett's also called for a retraction. He said it was destructive, what you said.
Well, you know, Bill Bennett has had disagreements with a number of things I've done in this campaign. I respect him and admire him, and I appreciate his constructive criticism.
You know, part of this campaign has become an almost Beirut-like situation where you have the religious fundamentalists on the far right, some of them. Apparently, yet last night, the exit polls show that 19% of the Virginia voters are on the far right. By the way, that you carried the 81% who aren't on the far right. I think it was an interesting number, although you still got beaten by 15 points. It just shows that the people that were against you are really against you. Let me ask you, I'm Roman Catholic. A lot of people here are Roman Catholic. I think none of us have grown up with any prejudice at all against us. In fact, we can't think of a time in our whole lives when anybody showed any prejudice against us. Yet you have raised the issue of anti-Catholicism in this campaign by Bob Jones. Is it a significant enough issue to talk about? I've never come across it.
Look, here's the deal. If you're a presidential candidate, not Joe Citizen, and you walk into a university or any organization, club, or anything, and they are people who not only practice anti-Catholicism, but anti-African Americans,
right.
have a policy barring interracial dating.
Right.
I mean, look.
But if you ever come across anti-Catholicism at all, Senator,
if you walk in there as a candidate for the President of the United States and don't say anything until 3 weeks later, then you are abandoning your role as a person who is supposed to provide some guidance to Americans.
If George Bush had never gone down to Bob Jones University, have you ever come across anti-Catholicism in your life?
Not in a long time.
Has anybody here ever come across anti-Catholicism?
I've certainly come across anti-African Americanism. I've come across.
What was it like? Just quickly, what was it like?
I think it's very common thing. I've heard it a lot in my life. I went to Catholic school.
I know. I'm listening. Just a minute. Go ahead.
You hear things like that people hate Catholicism, that all priests are molesters.
You heard that? Well, you've been unfortunate in your life. Let's take a question up there. I never heard of it.
We've also heard a great deal of anti-Semitism and a great deal of racial prejudice, and that's also there and needs to be addressed. I believe.
Question up there.
Good evening, Senator McCain.
Sorry, go ahead.
Good evening, Senator McCain. I was wondering if you could more specifically respond about the religious right and how it takes shape in America outside of the political leaders who have taken themselves on to wear the religious vest and say, I'm going to lead politics this way. How does it manifest itself in middle America? And would you consider Jesus part of the religious right?
What was the last part?
Would you consider Jesus part of the religious right?
What was the last question?
I don't know what it meant. I heard it. What did you mean by that? What did you mean by that?
Were the stands that Jesus took, would you consider those part of the religious right? At the time, Jesus was considered an outcast.
But who raised that issue?
I'm sorry?
Who raised that question?
I guess I'd like to try.
You did, I guess.
Let me try to answer. Look, there is a very significant and, thank goodness, a wonderful group of Americans. They are an important part of the Republican Party who have traditional family values, who have placed very great credence on religion, who are very family-oriented, who are wonderful people. That is the overwhelming majority of the so-called religious right. I was talking about two leaders. You cannot qualify as a leader of anything if you're going to call a good and decent, send out hundreds of thousands of phone calls with your voice on it, calling a good and decent man a vicious bigot. A man who served his country in the Korean War, his state as Attorney General, and in the United States Senate. You cannot do that and expect anything but from repudiation and condemnation from someone like me.
We're going to come back with more with Senator John McCain on the Hardball College Tour at the University of Southern California.
New Hampshire, we were able to, because we ran a positive campaigns, we were able to get the largest voter turnout in the history of the state of New Hampshire. Negative campaigning and negative advertising depresses that. So I hope that Governor Bush will do the same. If he does not, we will still not run any response ads or any kind of negative campaigning, and we will stick to our positive campaign.
Senator, back to Senator John McCain. Let me ask you, Senator, there's a lot of talk about the Michigan primary and those ads that went out. They were not ads, they were telephone calls. It reminded me of the old Liberty Lobby sort of radio announcement. This is Catholic Alert, and that kind of stentorian voice, and it talked about the South Carolina primary, etc. Did you think that was negative campaigning, putting on those telephone calls?
No, because they were factual, true. I've said them publicly. I will say them again. I will say exactly what that said, and that is that Governor Bush went to this university which practiced anti-Catholic bigotry, and he never said a word about it until 3 weeks later. Now, that's just about the text of that message. It's factually true, and I've said it. And he's got to understand that what works for him in South Carolina, he's responsible for as he moves through.
Well, let's take a look at what you said also on election night when you won that big Michigan primary with David Gregory of MSNBC.
The calls that were made that I had anything to do with, although I don't know who paid for them, had to do with pointing out that Governor Bush did go to an institution that prohibits racial dating, that is anti-Catholic.
And here's you this weekend on the same topic.
My campaign came to me and said, we want to make some calls. I said, as long as they are factual and correct, and the same thing that I would say on the Today Show or any other program, fine. Then they were portrayed as some calls that were somehow accusing Governor Bush of being anti-Catholic or a bigot. That's not true, and that's not what I would take responsibility for. And the question was, are you responsible for calls that portray him as anti-Catholic or anti-bigot? I said, no, they are not. And I did not pay for them. I have not paid for them. I will not pay for them, and I will never pay for them. I will pay for telephone calls if necessary, although we're not doing it now. And look, the entertaining thing about this is that there were calls made all over South Carolina accusing, of the most base and disgraceful kind.
I know about
But look, the fact is that I said that I had not paid for any calls that were portrayed him as anti-Catholic or anti-bigot. I stand by that, but I will stand by the calls that were made.
But at the time when you did that first interview on the evening of the Michigan primary, you did know that you had authorized calls to alert Catholics to what had been going on in South Carolina.
But I did not authorize any call that portrayed him as anti-bigot.
No, but you had authorized the Catholic alert series of telephone calls,
which were not anti-Catholic.
But at the time you were asked by David Gregory if you had approved these calls, you knew that you'd approved some of them.
He asked me if I'd approved calls which portrayed Governor Bush as anti-Catholic or as a bigot.
But since you knew that you had authorized some calls, weren't you giving a Clintonian answer at that point?
I don't.
An answer that was not.
I don't believe so.
No, we know what a Clintonian answer is. So. That's a lawyerly answer where you answer technically accurately, but clearly you know more than you're letting on, and you're deceiving the audience by not giving them a complete answer.
You can draw that conclusion.
What's your conclusion?
I can think it's the fifth time. I did not authorize any calls that portrayed him as anti-Catholic or or as a bigot. Now, that is a dramatic difference from what I did call. It's not Clintonian. It's a huge difference. And the question asked me was, did I authorize those calls? I didn't, I won't, and I haven't.
How did you know that the person asking the question, David Gregory, was referring to other calls and was not referring to the calls that you had authorized?
Because he asked me the question, did I authorize calls which were anti-Catholic or bigotry? At least that's the way I understood his question to be. It was very late at night. It had been a long day. It was election day. We'd been up since early in the morning, and that was my response, because that's the way I understood the question.
But the promise of your campaign and the name of your bus is straight talk.
Yep.
Do you believe, in retrospect, that when you took that interview, you were late at night, that you gave them a complete non-Clinton type answer? We've been living with what is means and this nonsense from the White House for a long time, and you are the best antidote to that, except in this instance.
There are many times when I could give a better answer. Perhaps I could have given it a better answer then.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to some more questions. Young lady downstairs.
Hi, Mr. McCain. I heard you talk about your disappointment that Mr. Bush visited Bob Jones University in light of their bigotry and anti-African Americanness. I was wondering, if elected president, what will you do to curb the discrimination that African Americans face and minorities in general face? Thank you.
And I want to clear up again, I think he's free to visit whatever institution he wants to visit. But if he visits an institution that employs these odious practices, then he has an obligation to speak out about them in opposition, not wait 3 weeks until the South Carolina primary is over. I will do everything in my power to see that we continue our efforts, which are a long, long way from our goals of eliminating discrimination in America wherever it exists. I believe that the military has been a good example of some of the things we can do to give people extra training, extra assistance, and get them up onto a level playing field. I will support programs such as Head Start and many other programs that help people do that. And finally, I want to devise a way where...
Well, I'm sorry, I'm hearing directions. Senator John McCain will be right back at the University of Southern California for more questions. Thank you. at the Norman Lear Center for Entertainment Studies at the University of Southern California. By the way, I want to thank you, Senator, for all the advertisement the other day when you invited your rival, one of your two rivals, George W. Bush, to join you here. I guess he prefers other kinds of colleges to visit. Anyway, let's go to some I Never Stop. I Never Stop. Let's go to a gentleman up here up in the balcony.
Okay, my name's Amir. I'm a freshman here at USC. And I have a two-part question for you. And the first part is are you against extremes in parties, or do you feel that active political participation is more important in American politics? And my second part of my question...
Okay, that's it. And don't bring a clipboard next time. Just kidding. It's very dangerous when somebody shows up with a clipboard. Go ahead, I'm saying.
The whole reason why I'm running for President of the United States is to connect young people again to their government. They become cynical, they become alienated, and I believe as President of the United States, I can inspire young Americans to commit themselves to causes greater than their self-interest. There's no way I can do that unless we heal this breach of confidence, which means campaign finance reform and getting the big money and the special interests out of Washington, breaking the iron triangle of big money legislation and special interest. But the whole way you achieve that is to energize young people and get them involved in the political process. That's the only way, is if they feel that they have a stake in it. And 28% of the people that voted in the Michigan primary had never voted before in their lives, and I was very encouraged by that.
Next question.
Hi, Senator.
Hi, Nancy.
How would you interpret the struggle for the soul of the Republican Party between the far right and the more moderate fiscal conservative message that you represent? Because what I'm envisioning is that Bush may win the nomination and lose in the general election, and you really have the opportunity, it seems to me, to bring in this broader base voter in November.
Thank you. I think it's... You know, Chris, Governor Bush used to brag about how he was inclusive and would bring in Democrats and independents. And then when I started bringing them in, he said that we were hijacking the party, which is an interesting switch. But
we're going to have to come right back again. Okay. I'm sorry, I keep getting yelled at. Anyway, thank you. We'll be back with John McCain in just a moment on Hardball.
We had to break for two questioners. I didn't finish. Sure. One of them, the first questioner, I would like to see us more involved in programs such as General Colin Powell is heading up, Volunteer America. That way we can get a lot more people involved and get to know each other, Boys and Girls Clubs, kind of a community kind of effort to eradicate and eliminate over time racial discrimination. As far as the other questioner is concerned, it's really what the campaign has now become all about. Are we going to reform our party, make it inclusive, make it one for everybody, inspire young Americans to be involved in the greatness and beauty of this noble experiment which has caused America to sit astride the world, most powerful nation in the world? That's what really this campaign is all about, which direction we will go in, and that's why I thank you for the question.
Well, California has once again led the way in that very spirit. The people of California have set many trends over the last 100 years. Not all of them great, but a lot of them pretty interesting.
Always interesting.
One of the trends they started was to establish what's called a blanket ballot, where everyone here can all vote on one ballot. Ralph Nader, the Green Party, the Republican, Democratic, Independent, all the parties on one ballot. We see who everybody sort of likes if they're given the freedom to vote. Then the hacks came along, the pals, your crowd, the guys you serve with. They came along and said, it doesn't count. You can vote any way you want, ladies and gentlemen. It's only going to count if you're a registered Republican, or else you're not going to affect the delegate selection. Suppose my newspaper, the San Francisco Examiner, plug, has a headline on Wednesday next week that says, McCain beats Bush in California blanket ballot. In Squeaker, loses all delegates because the registered Republicans voted by a majority to support the other guy. What will you say if that happens? It could happen based upon the polls.
I would say I'll abide by the rules of the party. I signed a pledge to do so. That doesn't change the fact that an incredible signal will be sent as to which candidate has the ability to win a general election. 40% of the electorate... 40% of the electorate is Republican, 20% independent, the other 40% Democrat. Nobody's going to win an election unless you're able to reach out, preserving your conservative base, reach out to independents and reassemble the old coalition that Ronald Reagan had that we called the Reagan Democrats.
Let's get some more participants. Sir, up top.
Senator, given the recent successes of your campaign, are you now afraid to lose?
I promise you, the one thing that I can't be in this campaign is afraid to lose. If I am, then it will distort everything we do. I have been part of other presidential campaigns, usually failed ones, I'm sorry to say, and I have seen what this process does to candidates. I cannot be afraid of losing, and if I am, then that would distort everything we're doing. And what can I mention? It's the greatest experience of my life. 3 weeks ago, we were 30 points down here in California. No one in there, no matter what they were smoking, just thought that we were going to be able to be where we are. And the fact is, it's been an exhilarating and happy ride, and however it turns out, and I'm very confident we're going to do very well, but we will have been on a great crusade that not only I will remember, but more importantly, have changed the shape of politics in America, and I'm very proud of that.
Senator, Liberty Bell is waiting. Are you going all the way to Philadelphia?
All the way to Philadelphia, I think we should travel.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Question, go ahead, sir.
Senator McCain, you were talking earlier about how you'd like to see the GOP to become more inclusive. Now, Governor Bush has shown that he can attract Latino votes, and I'm curious, if you are selected to be the candidate in November, how do you plan on attracting the Latino vote, especially here in California, where Prop 187 has alienated the Latinos from the GOP?
I thank you, and your description of the situation is totally accurate. I'm proud that in the last election in 1998, I got 55% of the Hispanic vote in my home state of Arizona in my Senate reelection. In the Michigan primary, I got the majority of the Hispanic votes that were cast in the primary. I have a long and strong relationship with the Latino and Hispanic community. I received awards from the Council of La Raza and LULAC for my work with them. I have fought against English-only ballot initiatives, and I have fought for better relations with Mexico, a lot of the border environmental issues. But most of all, I think that my continued communications with and being involved with Hispanic issues for many, many years has been what has allowed me to gain their approval, which is not easy to do given the way the Republican Party is viewed, particularly here in California. I think our major challenge as Republicans in California is to start being very, very much in tune with our Hispanic citizens.
How do we avoid the language war that goes on every day in Canada between French speakers, Francophones, and English speakers if we continue in the direction of more and more Spanish in our culture and our business? How do we avoid it becoming a fracture as opposed to just different cultures cohabitating and becoming one?
Well, first of all, the worst thing we can do is harm the rich culture and heritage that characterizes my state and this state. Spanish was spoken here before English was. Right. And if we would do anything to disrupt that, I think would be very damaging. But the other thing is that, look, everybody knows that you need to know English. Everybody knows if you're going to move out the economic ladder that you have to have English. And that's why I'm for adult literacy programs, bilingual programs that work, and a lot of them don't. We have to understand that there's nobody that wants to know English more than the person who doesn't know English. But at the same time, preservation of culture and heritage is a vital part of our heritage. And your forebears, who I think came from Ireland, wanted preserved the Irish culture and heritage that they brought with them. Yeah. So do the Hispanics.
Let's go upstairs. The gentleman up top.
Many people, excuse me, Senator McCain. Many people have strong views one way or the other, Republican or Democrat, but there are many people like me who are kind of in the middle. What do you think as a candidate would you do to appeal to the people in the middle, which seems to be a big part of this campaign? What do you feel would make us vote for you over other candidates?
I think, first of all, because you're a young American, I will give you a presidency that you can look up to and respect. I I think, second of all, I would take the government out of the hands of the special interests so that you're represented again, which you are not today in Washington, D.C. Third of all, I would make sure that you are capable of receiving the kind of education and training which will make you part of this incredible prosperity that we are experiencing in America, the most prosperous period in the history of time. It's in the history of this country. The bad news is there's a growing gap between haves and have-nots, and that has a lot to do with training and education. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure you are educationally qualified to go just as far as your ambitions will take you. I thank you, sir. Thank you.
A large number of people were just freed from death row in Illinois. I want to say 31, but the exact number is incidental. How should that fact affect our government's policy on the death penalty?
I believe that whenever you have new technology, and we have new DNA technology now, that wherever that might be applicable to any murder conviction, that they should go through that using new technology and capability to make sure that justice was achieved. I still support the death penalty. I think this technology will help us make sure that no innocent person is ever executed. And I don't think it'll ever be a perfect system, don't get me wrong. But I do believe this new technology will allow us to be far more precise, and I'll make sure that the death penalty is not abused. But I still believe the death penalty is appropriate for certain crimes. I thank you very much.
Senator McCain, we'll come back and talk about that violence in Pittsburgh and in Michigan the other day. We're going to talk about gun control. We'll be right back with Hardball. Spot today. It's like a Broadway theater here. Let me ask you about this.
One thing on education and training. Peter Forsman is here. He and John Walton offered scholarships to low-income family people, as you know, if they would contribute to it. The response was overwhelming. There is a desire on the part of parents in America, whether they be low or medium or high income, to get a quality education for their children. And programs such as like Peter sponsored and John Walton are the kind of things that we ought to do a whole lot more of.
Sometimes the news of the day is hard to absorb, to digest. The other day, a 6-year-old came into school with a pistol at 32, one slug. Something happened. Maybe he was encouraged to do so. He pulled out the gun and shot this girl in the neck. They were in some sort of a school kid fight. The kid's dead. When you first heard that story, probably during the day, what was your first focus? What did you think was wrong here?
I think like every other American, first you're shocked, then you wonder how such a thing could happen, and then third, you wonder what it is that could possibly motivate a child at that age to do something like that. And so one of the answers is obviously to reduce the availability of guns, develop technology. But the other question that's in your mind that you have to ask yourself is what factors are affecting these young minds that cause them to do that?
But if you were to give an entire classroom of kids that age a gun to play with a bullet in it, how long would it be before one of them did shoot the other one? Isn't the gun the problem? Why do kids at 6 years old have guns?
I agree with that. But today, I agree with that. Today, there was another terrible tragedy of shooting. Okay? Yeah, older children came to school. What is it that made them do that? What factor is it that makes them resort to violence and mayhem? And I think families, particularly parents, such as Cindy and me, ought to know what our kids are watching. And we ought to have somebody tell us what the impact is of all that on our children.
There were 17,000 murders. When anybody starts bragging about how great things are in this country, they say, we could fill a baseball stadium with the number of people murdered every year in this country. Fill the stadium.
And we filled
last year was 17,000 murders last year. 7,000 murders not with guns. It's a violent society. I agree with you. It's not just guns. People find ways of killing each other. It isn't England. It's not Japan. There's something about America, white or black, whatever, that's violent. What is it?
Well, obviously it's part of, it has something to do with our heritage, but the fact is for many years in this country, these things didn't happen and guns were more available than they are today. So again, you have to come down to what is it that is influencing these young minds. If you look at the Columbine tapes of those murderers, they talked about a video game. They talked about a character in it. They talked about how famous they were going to be when they murdered their schoolmates. Look,
maybe they saw The Matrix.
It's really, we've got to have an assessment. I hope the Surgeon General would give us an assessment on effective media violence on children. He did that in the 70s, so the Surgeon General did. So I think we need to assess more, but we also need to, in my view, have parents more involved, families more involved, communities more involved, including having schools and libraries that are wired to the internet, at taxpayers' expense, installs filtering software to be used according to community standards. There is a connection between some of this pornography and stuff and behavior of children. We've just seen too much of it.
President Clinton is going to go on the Today Show tomorrow morning, and he's very good at this sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
He's very good at it. He's the consoling big brother. I don't know what value it serves, but maybe people feel better. And I'm not going to knock it completely, but it's not a policy. He will come on and also advocate some kind of gun control. Take the jump on him. What's your response in terms of gun ownership, registration? Bill Bradley's out there saying register every handgun in the country. Of course, Bill Bradley doesn't have a good chance right now winning the election. Al Gore has a very good chance to win the election. He says register all new gun sales of handguns. Where are you in that mix?
I don't think it's necessary, number one, but number two is I would devote my efforts to what was in the Washington Post yesterday morning, and that is a wristband that has a chip in it that unless you have that wristband on, you can't pull the trigger. I'm for developing fingerprint technology that only the owner of a gun can fire that. I'm for safety locks. I'm for closing the pawn shop loophole. I'm for instant background checks. There's a lot of things we can do, but I'm also in favor of enforcing existing laws, which this administration is not doing.
There are powerful lobbies in Washington. There are the trial lawyers who are powerful, and that's why we get no tort reform. There are people who are very gung-ho for Israel. We get strong aid to Israel. There are people who don't want to have their guns taken away from them. They're called the National Rifle Association. Why are you so tough on interest groups in general, but not tough on the interest group that is in some way responsible for the fact that there's so many guns in this country?
If we ban the so-called soft money, we hurt the NRA just as much as we do anybody else. I mean, there's the soft money is what nurtures every one of these special
including NRA soft money.
Exactly. So I'm as hard on them and their undue influence as anybody else. There should be a level playing field.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back with John McCain at the University of Southern California. For Entertainment Studies for making this all possible here at one of the most beautiful schools in the country. It's like an Ivy League school. It's an Ivy League school with sun. This is, I think, a nice comment. Sir, why don't you start right there?
Senator McCain, since we've well past the boiling point with Columbine last year, I want to know, if elected, what's your plan to stop teachers and first graders from worrying about getting shot or beaten up in school?
First of all, I would allow teachers the right to discipline the children in the classroom without fear of being sued. That is... If a child is disrupting their classroom, they should have the right to have that child removed. Second, obviously, we go back to the conversation that we just had concerning an assessment of what the impact is on these young people. And third of all, obviously, we need to take the measures on gun control that we talked about before. I don't believe it's necessary to register every handgun in America. I don't see the point there. But I certainly do see that the ability to develop technology that would make sure that no matter where that gun was left, that only the owner of a gun would be the one who would be able to use it. And I think that that's a very important technological measure that is very close to fruition.
What do you say to the young woman or man who says they love your style, they love your message of reform, they love your biography and your contributions to your country, which are so emblematic of the best we can have, but they say, I disagree with you about abortion choice, abortion rights. What do you say? They're here. They have to vote for president next Tuesday in other states, different times. They've got to decide as even 18-year-olds. My son's voting this time. How do they decide when they like you, but they consider their right to an abortion, to choose one, as part of their constitutional rights?
My answer is that, first of all, I hope their vote would not be decided on any single issue, because we think single-issue votes and single-issue candidates are not good for democracy. Second of all, I hope that we could work together on a broad variety of issues. I respect pro-choice views. I also happen to be pro-life and proud of it and have that voting record. I believe that about 90% of Americans want a ban on partial birth abortion. I would sign that bill as soon as it crossed my desk. I believe that parental consent and parental notification are overwhelmingly supported. I think before our daughter would consider such a procedure, we should be notified of it if she is underage. And finally, there's areas we can work together. Adoption should be a lot easier in America than it is. There's thousands of children that want parents and vice versa. And we should work to improve foster care as well. Look, this whole fight is going to be about the hearts and minds, I realize I have to win over the hearts and minds of the people who are pro-choice, and I want to enter that dialogue and discussion with them, and I believe the argument is on my side, but I would certainly be glad to listen to their views and respect them.
Thank you, John McCain. We'll be right back with the Senator from Arizona. Will continue this time to Minnesota for the Governor Jesse Ventura is going to be on the show. And on Hardball, we'll be there in 2 weeks on March 15th. Also, tomorrow morning, I have to do this for my NBC contract. I'm just kidding. The president will be on the Today Show tomorrow morning. Let me ask you, what do you think of Ventura? Would you put him on a ticket with you? Don't laugh. He's a strong guy.
He's a heck of a guy. He and I have a lot in common. We were both in the United States Navy. I was a mediocre high school and college wrestler, and I wear a feather boa around the Senate on occasion. So we have a lot in common.
Next question.
He's a straight talker. He's a straight talker also.
Okay, upstairs. First question.
I have an idea about how kids could participate in this election by bringing parents to vote. My question for you is, do you think that's a good idea, and do you have any other ideas about how kids could help?
Well, how do kids get their parents off the keisters to vote?
I think that one of the ways you can do that is that there's a program that's nationwide called Kids Vote, and I don't know if you're familiar with that program, but it's a wonderful program, and in many states like mine, and I hope they'll do that here in California, they have a ballot booth for children to go and vote also, and they tabulate and publish those votes. And I think Kids Vote is one of the great programs that we have. Second of all, remind your parent of their civic duty. The most precious part of democracy is the right to select our leadership, and I hope you'll remind them of it, and all of your classmates will as well, including your teacher. Thank you.
Senator John McCain, thank you for being here at the University of Southern California. Thank you.